All right, so looks like we're live. Sorry, I had a little bit of duplication of sound, but it is what it is. I had to get Instagram up and ready to rock and roll. So, welcome back to the Tuesday night live stream. I'm Brian with Blerding While Dad, and we got a lot of ground to cover. Getting a little bit more comfortable with the format. This is actually what I've needed to kind of have my outlet where I can just let my mind drift and talk about stuff that popped up that I normally end up ranting about myself to. Um, I'm reconsidering the format. I'm almost thinking about taking this exclusively to TikTok live because I think that's where I actually have an audience. Um, so if you're out there and you like the live format, please let me know that you're interested in live format. And I'll be repeating that throughout the episode because I'm kind of weighing out what audience I want to be in front of. And I'm really trying to narrow where I'm at. So if you read the title or if you have not, this was going to get a little bit political, but then we're also going to talk about some other stuff that's popping off. Um, but leading off the top of the news, right now we kind of have the Muppet takes the White House kind of thing going on, and I'm gonna just front load this conversation. I'm gonna front load this thing. Um, yeah, we getting political, and you may not agree with me, and that's cool. I'm fine with it. I got people that disagree with me all over my Facebook feed. I'm cool with a lot of people that don't necessarily agree on my political takes. Um, the problem I get is when we start with the acerbic, or you trying to insult me or belittle me or question my intelligence, which I'm gonna get to in a little bit. Just because I have a different political take than you. One of the things is I went to school for journalism. Like this is what I was going to do. And so I do try to provide, even the reason why I burnt out of my old blog was because I was trying to apply journalistic rigor to comic book writing, writing about comic books, and doing my research. And it got exhaustive because a simple article would take about 3 or 4 hours of research. And these are short form, like these aren't really long articles, and they're not really serious either. But I do take being factual seriously. So I'm saying all that to say this. If you don't agree with me, there's plenty of platforms where you're gonna find people that agree with you. Social media is an amazing thing. You can literally find anything on social media. You can find any group of people, any community of people that's going to agree with you, no matter how malformed your takes are, or how hateful your takes are. You're always going to find a group of people that mess with you and rock with you. So if this ain't the platform for you, if you're finding yourself getting pissed off of the stuff I say, there's other platforms out there for you, because I don't really do the trolling back and forth kind of thing. So if you don't agree with me, cool, we can part and separate. But understand that that's what this is. This is kind of an outlet for me, but also I do really try to be as factual as possible in these. But like I said, there's other corners of the internet you can go to if you don't agree with what I'm saying. So I'm putting that out there on the front end. All right. So understand this, we do get political here. I really don't deal with trolls. If you don't agree with my politics, cool. There are plenty of channels that will agree with you, and you can go find them. I'm not going to give you the energy you're looking for, especially on a live stream. Like I'm just not doing that. All right. So a couple months ago, I mentioned that our rights are kind of being beta tested. And it was a lot of that early executive action that was happening, in the first couple of months of the presidency, where it was a lot of not necessarily following the typical rules of engagement when it comes to legislation or whatnot, and trying to circumvent that with executive order after executive order after executive order, and not necessarily worrying about the legality of those executive orders as they rolled out. It was kind of said, well, the courts will figure it out. And the hope was that either it gets mired down in court, we never get a definitive answer, or it gets mired down in court and we're allowed to operate I can't talk tonight. We can operate outside the court system until they actually give us an order, and then we can kind of skirt the order. And I felt like our rights were kind of being in this beta tested mode where we didn't quite know what our rights were. And also, there wasn't a heck of a whole lot of reassurance coming out of the White House that they were really going to honor the Bill of Rights. And honor the Bill of Rights is really a loose term, because if you if you are black or you have people that are, if you have black folks that are older than you, they live, if you got a black person that's 60 or 70 years old, they lived at a time where America was a fascist country for black folks. Um, and they were second class citizens. And so, and it's not really that far off. My grandma's grandma was a slave. And so, um, you got to keep that in mind. And so this idea of rights, it's always been kind of, if you're not in specific segments of the country or you're not in the right neighborhood, your rights are really kind of ideas and concepts. And so I said your rights are being beta tested. And I kind of stand 10 toes down on that, because now we're rolling out, basically we're looking at the federalization, the federal takeover of Washington and their police force. Um, and to come out and say, essentially, yeah, we're trying this, and then start listing off other Democrat cities. And I don't like using, the Democrat runs, but that's really what it is. Listing off other Democrat or black run cities, that you're going to try this in, but you're beta testing it in Washington, D.C., which is Chocolate City, which is one of the blackest cities, major cities, in the country, outside of the Deep South. And so that's what's happening right now. Like, they took over, law enforcement in Washington, D.C., and deployed like 800 National Guard troops. I don't know what the goofy name he called it was. But the legal basis is Section 740 of the D.C. Home Rule Act, and it permits federal control in emergencies, extendable up to 30 days with congressional notification. And that's the rub right there, because there's going to be a fight in Congress about how long they're going to extend this. Because the reasons why they deployed this stuff was really specious. It's because that little Hitler youth, look him up, that was called Big Balls, who was working on the Doge team, got jumped and beat up. Apparently, I don't know the legality of it. I've seen, if the maggots can kind of troll Jesse Smollett, I can kind of troll Big Balls. I don't think that he really got beat up, but it is what it is. They're saying he got jumped and beat up, and now, because of that, DC has a crime problem in Trump's mind. I mean, in El Presidente's mind, DC has a spiraling out of control crime problem, even though the numbers don't necessarily bear that out. Violent crimes down anywhere between 26 and 35% in 2025 compared to 2024, and it's contradicted the stated reasoning of, essentially, the federal takeover of law enforcement in DC. And I've already seen the video start coming out where literally these federal troops are just wandering around DC because they don't really have much direction, and literally just messing with people that are sitting outside. Like, I saw the video where they rolled up to brothers that was he was sitting on his porch smoking a cigarette. And basically asked, "Hey, what are you doing out here? What's going on?" And he's like, "I'm sitting out here in my front yard, sitting out here on my front porch, actually." And there was this big long speech, and then said, "Let your homies know that we're out here." And they're basically doing the broken windows policy that they tried in New York, which led to lawsuits and lawsuits and lawsuits about, stop and frisk and racial profiling. So we know what the flavor is, and we know what time it is. They dumped in hundreds of agents from the FBI, DEA, ATF, and DHS. And a lot of it is to go out there and survey what's going on in DC. And I don't know necessarily what's going on because I'm not in the room, but I could talk about what I'm perceiving, especially from some of the video footage that's been shared, online, about how black folks' interactions are going with the cops. And let's be really clear, it is messing with black folks. All right. Once you get outside the capital area of DC, it's a lot of black neighborhoods and stuff, and you're going to find all stratifications of black wealth in DC. You're going to find the kind of elite, bourgeois. You're going to find middle class. And you're going to find poor people. And it's all up and down DC. And so, but they've deployed basically federal troops to go in there and be hall monitor to the black folks in DC, under the auspices of, or under under the auspices of, oh, DC's crime is out of control, which it really isn't. We're talking about an isolated incident of crime that may or may not have actually happened to somebody that was in that Trump, I don't necessarily think they were in the inner circle, but they were, an appendage to that inner circle. Okay. And Trump is framing DC as the model for similar actions in other Democrat-led cities like New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and other ones that he's mentioned. I even heard him mention, some of the MAGAs mention Omaha as a potential target because we have a black mayor who used to be a cop. I don't know where this framing of Omaha being like this super hardcore liberal bastion. It's a blue city, but it's not as left as people want to think it is. But uh, basically using this to frame it as a model to how they're going to take over other cities. They already did it in Los Angeles against the will of the governor and mayor. And so now they're beta testing it and testing the rollout in other cities and what it would look like. This is not good. Um, I grew up in a place where I've had it, and there's a cultural element to this. So I need y'all to kind of ride along with me. Um, there's going to be something I'm going to say that's going to connect with some of y'all. It's going to lose other ones, and so I need to say this. I'm kind of putting myself in the center of the picture. There's a thing to be said when you're dealing with a bored cop on his shift. When you are dealing with a bored police officer, bored law enforcement official who has nothing else to do but sit in your neighborhood and patrol around, they're always there. Depending on who they are, but a lot of times they're going to find something to do, and typically that something to do is bothering people that are sitting there minding their own business because they have nothing better to do. And so you're going to see them asking questions and violating people's Fourth Amendment rights. You're going to see that kind of stuff. And that's the stuff that happened where I was growing up, where we had a lot of bored cops just kind of sitting around because, we had to roll out the police presence, but there was really nothing for them to do once they got there because the way the crime works, it's sporadic. And just because there's a cop in one neighborhood doesn't mean that it's going to stop a crime in a nearby neighborhood. And so what happened was you would find a lot of really bored cops just hanging around, and typically that's where the trouble begins. And so what we're looking at is we're going to deploy thousands and thousands and thousands of law enforcement officers and National Guard troops out to these Democrat-led cities, and they're not going to have anything better to do. And when you don't have anything better to do, but you have this mandate to reduce crime, what that turns into is we're going to bother the people in the city, in the place of the city where they deployed us. And I don't know if we know enough about specifically what areas of town are targeted, but we can read I could read the writing on the wall just because I saw, through the video footage that's been shown where they're targeting in DC. We know what this is, bro. And so now I don't know if we're still in that beta test. I almost feel like now we're preparing to roll this out and actually launch this thing. So, and a lot of legal experts are talking about moves like this outside of DC will face major constitutional challenges. I need to be honest with you. I think that is a little bit of naivete on the part of a lot of libs. A lot of liberals are really naive about this thing. And they don't understand that the game is already over. There's no need for soft power. They have no need for soft power anymore. They could do whatever they want to do, and they have the backing of the courts to do it because they've kind of constructed it that way, where you have judges that are friendly and loyal to a specific administration. And so the pushback you're going to find is limited because even when judges do push back against the legalities of it, they turn the machine against them. And next thing you know, these judges are getting death threats. They're getting doxxed online and things like that. So basically they're using coercion to leverage what they want out of these judges. And this idea that, well, that's against the law, that ain't never stopped anybody in this administration from doing anything. Being against the law don't matter. I need y'all to grasp that. Like, it doesn't matter. Laws matter to me. They matter to you if you're watching this. But once you reach a certain threshold and a certain level of political connection, especially as it is now, it's always kind of been like this, but if you're in the right circles, the laws are it's kind of a suggestion for you as well. And so the idea that, hey, that's illegal, they can't do that, the courts are going to stop this. No, they ain't. Hey, that's illegal. If they try to move outside of what the Constitution allows, that's what you're going to see. law enforcement and the military take a stand. No, you're not. The game is afoot. The game is over, y'all. It's over. When you put the people in power that tell you they're going to suspend the Constitution for a while, um, sometimes you got to believe them. You got to believe them when they tell you what they're going to do. So that's where we're at right now. And like I said, if you're looking, trying to, and I'm a connect the dots kind of guy, try not to, because my conspiracy brain will absolutely affix to this and start firing off some of the wildest shit that you've ever seen. Um, but when you look at the rollout of how they're mobilizing ICE with the mass, and they can just kind of disappear people, a lot of that was happening in 2020, and it wasn't ICE that was doing it. It was federal law enforcement that were masking up and masking up and throwing sacks on people's head and throwing them in unmarked vehicles. Um, you know, that's not far off, and that's not something outside the scope of possibility. That's what's, because that was what's happening in 2020, and that was as close to nationwide martial laws we've come in a long time. So they're not going to make the same mistakes again. Don't think that any peaceful protest is going to remain peaceful. You're going to start seeing some of those 20th century or late 19th and early 20th century methodology of breaking up protests, where you send undercover people in to agitate the crowd and start stuff. And we've already seen footage. I've seen footage of that in Milwaukee from 2020, where they actually were talking to a guy who was not from the community, who was breaking windows and throwing bottles, and people are questioning him and asking him. And I think he pulled out a knife on somebody. And so, they're saying, "What are you doing?" And he would fight. He was trying to fight them because they were trying to stop him from breaking windows and starting stuff. And so that's what they used to do to put down protests. You would put a couple of, and I forgot what the specific company was. It was the first private law enforcement agency that was operating in New York, and they kind of ended up becoming part of the NYPD. But a lot of the robber barons used to use them to break up labor protests and stuff. And so that was kind of the blueprint. You go in there, start agitation, and then give law enforcement the opportunity to use force to suppress the protest. And we've already seen it. So I'm just telling y'all, man, lace up your boots, because that's kind of what we got coming. That's what we got coming. And they've already hinted at it. I think we're going to see an all-out stop, especially if the poll numbers don't go the way he wants them to. We're going to see an all-out frenzy to disrupt the midterms as much as possible. And I know that electoralism and stuff like that, like, people are off of electoralism and voting is going to change things and blah blah blah. And I guess I am still a little bit wistful about that, hopeful on a limited scale. I don't have a whole lot of faith in it, but I will say this: if voting wasn't as important as some of y'all are framing it as, why are there being billions and billions and billions, and even I think we're probably at trillions of dollars being dumped into altering people's votes? It does matter on some level, especially in your primaries. Get out there and vote your primaries in your local elections if you don't do anything else. Start local. Even if you don't believe in the national scale in the national elections and stuff, get out there and get local, because all politics are local, and those are the ones that are going to affect you the most. And it's starting in the state houses first. Some of the more egregious removals of people's rights are starting in local state houses, and so you need to be fully aware of what's happening there. Even in the state of Nebraska, there's been a couple of different things with the marijuana stuff, and then the overtime and making sure people are getting compensated for their time and stuff, and paid time off, specifically paid time off, where the legislature has overturned and maneuvered to overturn the vote of the people. It's things that the state voted for in the legislature, because the legislature is really partisan at this point, which it really hasn't been. Like, in the state of Nebraska, this is kind of a new thing, where the legislature is hyper partisan, but they have ignored the will of the people and basically ignored things that Nebraskans have voted for, and found ways to play the game and make sure that those laws don't really get in the books, or they're not enforced as well. Um, through that. And so all politics are local. Start there first, even if you don't believe in the national thing. You know, and this is how you build national candidates that you believe in, bro. You start taking over the local scene and putting the people that align with you politically in those spaces, and then you let them kind of work through the system while still holding them accountable to the same ideals that you possess. And you know, that's how you build movements there. If you're going to play the political game, you got to play this game that's established. You can't just introduce a brand new game and just introduce your own people without playing the political game to a degree. So that's my rant on that piece of it. They're beta testing for martial law. They're targeting political opponent strongholds under the guise of public safety, testing public response and operational logistics. I'm just telling you that. And if you want to go out there and protest, leave your damn phone at home. If you are actually considering going out and getting out in these streets to protest, leave your phone at home. Don't take it. Don't photograph yourself. This is a serious thing. Do not take your phone with you when you go protest. When you go out in the streets, leave all that stuff home. Don't take pictures of other people doing stuff. Leave that at home, because in an environment where because right now we're kind of at the end game of where they were in 2020, where we had gotten enough where we're starting to see some egregious violations of people's civil rights, and we had kind of been conditioned through 4 years of it. Now it's happening at the beginning. We're not even out of the first year of the term. And so if you think it got crazy in 2020, what they were doing to protesters, it's going to get crazier now. So leave your phone at home. Don't document that stuff. Keep it off social media. Okay? I'm just saying. Yeah, there's going to be organizing and stuff, but I just want you to keep a lot of this stuff off of social media. That's just what it is. Cover your tracks. Use a little bit, cover your tracks and make sure that you're protecting yourself while using your constitutional rights. You got to be smart about it. All right. So now that we're all thoroughly depressed, let's go ahead and move on to something that is even a little bit more jarring. So one thing I'm kind of noticing, and it's been something that the incel and the red pill, and I mentioned early on, I kind of give you the heads up that I'm kind of anti-red pill, anti-manosphere, anti-incel space. I'm not nice about it either. And the loser core thing is kind of where I'm seeing as the gateway drug to that, where you have this group of, and it's not just men that are doing it, but it's largely men, where they've leaned into this persona of I'm a loser and a failure, and wearing it as this badge of honor. And I get it. Sometimes you got to be self-deprecating and stuff like that, but they take it to an extreme where that ends up becoming their entire identity. You see it on Reddit, you see it on Discord, you see it on TikTok, some niche YouTubers and stuff, where people just talk about what a terrible loser they are, and woe was me. And it ends up not becoming where it's a joke. It ends up crossing over into some other unseemly stuff. I'm gonna tell you now, the reason why I created this space is I want guys specifically, especially young men that are on that pipeline where you are starting to identify with some of this stuff and starting to feel like you are powerless, specifically in your interactions with women, and you're always going to lose out because there's always going to be somebody with more money and blah blah blah. Listen, I want you to not give away your power, and that's what I'm seeing when I say give away your power, where you completely absolve yourself of accountability for outcomes, and everything's outside of the scope of your control. I don't want y'all to fall down that rabbit hole, because that's a really difficult rabbit hole to extricate yourself from. Once you start thinking that all these things are conspiring against you and you have no power, that's when you can fall under the sway of grifters who want to take your money and shove you into these, be an alpha male, be a red pill, be an alpha male and dominate, and all this other weird shit that, the Andrew Tate really took advantage of young boys who saw somebody who looked to be strong. It was an approximation of strength. And a lot of the approximation was he was muscular, he was a kickboxer or whatever. Um, but then also forceful in his approach, and belligerent in his nature. And that was a mask. That was a veneer of strength. And it was really addictive to the legion of people that fell under his weight and gave him money, because that's what the end point is. A lot of these guys are trying to monetize you. They get you all disaffected, and then they find ways to grift you for money. I see it in men going their own way. You see those groups where all you got to do is pay for this course, and we'll show you how to uphold your rights as a man. Shoot, I see it in the ADOS community, and this is an in-house conversation for Black folks, but white folks, y'all can jump in here. The sentiment of the anti-immigrant Black folks online, and it's a small group of people that have a very loud voice because they're belligerent and they're everywhere, especially on Twitter. ADOS, FBA, foundational Black Americans, American descendants of slavery and stuff, and it's a really strong anti-immigrant sentiment. I have a lot of written. I was going to do a full expose on that in 2016, where a lot of the anti-immigrant sentiment was coming from, because I saw it coming early, and how there's some right-wing think tanks that aligned and paid some very influential Black folks off. And now they created a movement that's anti-immigrant, and it was really designed to get Black folks voting for right-wing candidates, but it took on a life of its own online. But they even fall into the loser core thing, where, well, the immigrants are taking all of our opportunities as Black people, and we have to we have to use force to get that back, and force them out and stuff like that. And so we start seeing hateful ideologies that kind of flow out of the loser core thing. And I don't know if that's specifically the word for it, but that's what I'm calling it. And it's cloaked in humor and self-deprecation, and it looks harmless on the surface, but it appeals to people feeling alienated and socially excluded. And a lot of times, some of the social exclusion, and I'm gonna be honest with you, because I'm about to piss somebody off. I'm about to piss some people off, but I think I heard Little Bill put this over on his channel. There is a lot of, and this is not right or left, because they're both on the fringes of this. There's a lot of I'll say it, white guys that are on the left and the right, who they aren't getting the same benefits that their parents and grandparents had from just being white. Like, they have to actually compete in ways that their parents and grandparents never had to compete with Black and brown folks, and they don't like that. And that's the challenge. And it's hard for some folks to see that within themselves. Where is all this anti-immigrant or anti-brown or you're mad at women stuff coming from? Well, a lot of it has to come with the fact that they feel like they have to compete, and they don't feel equipped to compete in one way or the other. And that's kind of an internal thing. But you're finding that especially a lot of angry white leftists are in that space, where they assume that their skin color is supposed to afford them a level of status in the society, even though they won't mention it, or even though they won't verbalize it in the words they use and the way they talk about it. They feel like they're owed something, because when they look at how their grandparents and parents lived, these were things that were kind of assumed that they would have access to, and they don't. And so now they're struggling with the rest of us who are scrapping and fighting for things that are evaporating, and they don't like it. And they can easily fall into that loser core kind of space. And so it starts out, it's a slippery progression, right? It starts with the self-deprecation, right? Harmless jokes about being a failure and how much of a loser you are. I do them sometimes too, but it's a joke, right? And it starts out harmless, but then it becomes this victimhood loop where you're blaming society and external factors for everything that's going wrong. And you start giving away complete ownership of your outcomes. One of the things I learned early on is you are totally responsible for your outcomes, whether you are responsible for them or not, which is a crazy thing to say. But, there are things that you don't have any control over that you also have a level of responsibility for. And you can't externalize all your outcomes to other stuff. And I know that the thing is, the Black victimhood stuff, and that's one thing white nationalists and racists use denigrate black folks, but a lot of black folks are almost hyper aware of, we're so in tune with it where we blame ourselves for shit that we have really nothing to do with. And you can see it about the way we talk about ourselves, the way we talk about our community sometimes. um you know Anytime somebody gets shot, what are we going to do? What are we doing? Well, we didn't do anything. You were talking about a criminal in our community, and I don't have any control over a criminal in my community any more than somebody out in West Omaha in a mansion has control over a criminal in their community. But for some reason, because me and this person are both black and share the same skin color, I'm supposed to be able to have some control or exercise some control over what this criminal does and what they don't do. And a lot of it has to do with how we came up the collectivism and stuff like that. But I'm not going to go into that. That's another rabbit hole. Um, but um, when you start giving away your power to external forces, um, that to me, that's a red flag. When you start giving away the responsibility for the outcomes in your life to other forces and saying this is completely outside of my control, you know, that's where you cross the line. Um, you know and there's a balance here, especially when you historically have not had disadvantages that you don't control. Some people don't necessarily know how to deal with that. When you've never really been disadvantaged for something that's been completely outside of your ability to control it, that can be disorienting if you're so used to the privilege of being able to kind of control every single outcome in your life. So but yeah, it starts in that victimhood loop, blaming society for everything, where there's no accountability, where no actions you're ever going to take are going to extricate you from what you're facing. Okay. And then it kind of morphs into being a misanthropy, where it's like a generalized hatred of all people. And you see it in the troll community. The people that just live in comment sections just to fuck with people, just to say the ugliest things to people online that are doing things that they aren't brave enough to do themselves, which is sit in front of a camera and talk, whether right, wrong, or indifferent. They don't. You find that in the troll community. No matter what you're doing, there's always going to be some troll sitting there ready to crap all over your best efforts and wipe their ass with it. And that's just what it is. And so you start drifting over into that. I've actually had trolls on another channel that I have on TikTok, where I talk about marketing stuff. And I normally don't feed the trolls, don't engage with them, but this one was really kind of an interesting case, because he was mad about a video I did about price strategy for small business owners. And so essentially I had to frame the question to him as, so are you saying that I don't deserve to get paid for the work that I do? And once I was framing his agitation of what I was saying as that, then the conversation changed. So the troll community, the people that just exist online to make other people miserable, um, you know, they just jump online to stick that sly little nasty comment in your comment section just to piss you off and ruin your day. And that's what they exist for. And that ends up becoming this generalized misanthropy, because if you follow their accounts or see what other things they posted, they never post anything positive on anybody's stuff. And they only follow channels of people that they hate. In more cases, they religiously follow channels of people that they hate and loosely follow people that they agree with. And they never comment, they rarely comment on people that they like. It's always, and when they do comment on people that they like, it's always something negative towards other people. So it starts out with misanthropy, and then for some aspects of it, it turns into misogyny, depending on who the actor is or who it is, whether the person is male or female. Sometimes it could even be women. I mean, you can have internalized misogyny. It's a thing. It's just like internalized racism. And so, but a lot of it crosses over. So once you start that misanthropy, then you move to racism and misogyny and all the other isms that are tied to it, where you create this enemy in your head, and now you're mad at them and you're going to punish them unilaterally. In your mind, you're going to be all over the comments and posting racist stuff because you don't have any control of what's going on in your life. Okay. And it always starts as a shield of humor, right? Like, what? You can't take a joke? You can't take a joke? A couple weeks ago, I did a video talking about the racist parts of the internet, and the trolls jumped in my comments One talking about, let me hold your hand while I tell you this. Listen, man, um, my school district, we had a race riot, like literally, you know, shut down a school. We had skinheads at our school. You know what I'm saying? If you were a black person in the 90s, there are parts of, places around town where it was not wise to go rolling dolo or going by yourself, because you could end up in a confrontation with some actual racist people. Like, we actually dealt with the violent racists, who weren't necessarily hiding behind computer screens. And so you don't really have to explain the racist subcultures to me. Plus, I did work in group homes where I interacted with gang members. I had white nationalists in my house, in my group homes and stuff. And so I've actually interfaced with that level of racism. So it's not brand new to me. It's not just online. But when I say the racist part of the internet, Stormfront been around for a long ass time. And that's where a lot of this stuff's coming from. But then Reddit was really bad, like I said, 4chan and stuff like that. But I had those trolls pop up on my stuff trying to poo-poo and laugh at the racism I've actually lived and experienced. I'm older than a lot of y'all. And so a lot of the racism that people my age, I'm in that Gen X millennial, like that inner space between the two. And so a lot of the racism we experienced was offline when I was coming up. It was offline until almost when I was in college, you know? And so, we actually experienced it in real life, and it wasn't hidden behind a screen. So yeah, I don't necessarily, that those trolls, they fell up in there, but I didn't really give them any attention. One of them was talking about, I want the good old fashioned funny racism. You should be able to laugh at it. Yeah. But throw this out there. The group that is being racist doesn't necessarily get to laugh at the racist jokes that they tell. The dominant group doesn't get to laugh at the racist jokes. We get to evaluate. The group that's not dominant gets to evaluate, okay, I just have to laugh this off because that's the only way I can process this. Like I said, I was talking about something where I was talking about boring racism. It's not even boring, it was boring racism. I mentioned that offhand. That's what I was talking about, where it's not even interesting racism. It's just boring racism. Okay. But they use the shield as humorous. Hate mask is just joking. And it always makes it harder to challenge. And anytime somebody says just joking, it's just they said something super, super racist. And then they're like, oh, I'm just joking. Why don't you get a sense of humor? And then here's the radicalization piece, because algorithms push progressively extreme content, because the reason why it does that is the algorithm is going to push content that you engage with. If you engage and argue with racist trolls, then you're going to see more stuff where racist trolls exist. They're going to say, oh, you must like this. We're trying to keep you on platform so we can show you more ads. And so they're going to keep showing that to you. And then if you engage with it, you're going to see more and more of it. And then it creates an echo chamber. I think FD called it a content bubble. I've heard other people call it content bubble. He was the one that I've heard mention it most recently, where you're trapped in this bubble and all you're getting is hateful content served to you because that's what you're looking for, because that's what you engage with most online. And it becomes this perpetuating cycle where everything you see on social media is hateful and racist, and you end up getting walled off, and that ends up informing your new reality. I'm a marketer. I used to tell people, if you give me $1 million and some of the psychographics, I can distort your sense of reality on your Facebook page. It's not hard. You can really target somebody with a bunch of ads and content, and even retarget them with stuff and really shape what they see and how they view the world, especially if they get most of their news off social media. Okay. So even without violence, these places are emotionally and socially toxic, and they feed off of each other. Okay. And so my take is this: making fun of yourself and laughing at yourself occasionally is cool. Feeling like you've lost out is cool sometimes. Even feeling sorry for yourself, self-pity is a natural thing. But when that becomes your everything, when everything is woe is me, and you actually go out and look for negative things to feed your brain, you are falling down a rabbit hole that you may have a very difficult time pulling yourself out of. And the reason why I'm saying that is I'm talking to a lot of a lot of my white liberal friends that may be seeing this, and hearing them talk about how they lost such and such to MAGA. They lost their dad to MAGA. They lost their mom or grandma to MAGA. what happens is when you sit around in the house and watch news, and watch a specific type of news, or see all the bad things that are going on in the world, or you just have people sending you negative things about somebody getting killed or robbed or hurt on social media, your algorithm will see how much time you spend on that piece of content, and then say, okay, they must like this, I'm gonna send them more of it, and then they build a content bubble around themselves. That's what happened to a lot of older, more vulnerable folks, where they ended up distorting what they thought was happening in the world. You know, I remember I had a friend in Portland in 2020, and he's like, yeah, all this shit that they're talking about Portland being on fire, they're talking about like one block. It's like we're down here and we don't even know what's going on. Like we're not even affected. We just went out to the bar. We're just having a normal night out. They're talking about one contained block. But to hear some news organizations tell it, this was some widespread, the whole city was ablaze, and all kinds of other crazy shit. But to hear some people tell it, their sense of reality got distorted based on what they were being fed by the algorithm in the news. It's a very vicious cycle, and loser core extends to a lot of these hate groups and a lot of these movements, because it really targets people that feel like they're marginalized, or they're being asked to share a station in society that they never had to share before, or their parents didn't have to share. And so that's what it turns into. All right, related to this, God, I need to get to something. I need to get to something that's a little bit more fun. I do want to talk about nerds, and how we have this weird extreme addiction to hating everything. Like, and I know there are nerds that are going to follow what I'm saying. Nerds ruin things. We hate things that we love. And the reason why we do it is we love things so hard. We love genres or comic books or a movie so much that we end up overbearing the expectations, like a movie franchise specifically, where we overrate our expectations and end up nitpicking it to death. Okay. And so I'm going to tell you about it. It's a reflexive negativity. And I'm going to just kind of roll it down because I'm going to run through this piece. So it's hypothetical situation. But let's look at any movie, any superhero movie specifically, because we're talking about nerds, or any nerd franchise kind of movie. You know, your Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, you know, even Harry Potter and all those other ones. You know, anyone that has a fandom attached to it of enthusiasts. Let's run down the cycle. The trailer drops. The trailer comes out immediately. The trailer comes out immediately. There's posts on X. I'm gonna call it Twitter. There's posts on X or Twitter, where they're just freeze framing and putting stills of the trailer up and talking about this suit isn't right, or this person doesn't look right, or this looks like, nitpicking little bits and pieces of it. Or you'll see behind the scenes photographs, because most movie sets have photographers who take pictures of stuff behind the scenes so they can release it to press kits and stuff. And they'll see a picture of somebody in the superhero suit, but there's no CGI, there's no color correction applied to it. They're just seeing what it actually looks like in real life before we actually do the movie stuff that makes a movie a movie. And they're like, this suit doesn't look right, or this person's too tall, or they're too skinny, or whatever. You know, they mock the behind the scenes for the lack of virtual effects or grading. And these are the things that make a movie a movie. So basically you're seeing the raw, unedited version of it, and you're creating entire hate campaigns based on that. If we're being honest, man, the Snyder Cut folks, they were actually one of those groups I'm talking about, where they are actively making it miserable to be a fan of DC comic book movies, because every single time something comes up, they gotta stampede to just shit all over it, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating to exist online because you can't talk about it without one of them charging in and just saying the most negative stuff ever, because their hero isn't making movies in DC anymore. And I don't think he necessarily wants to, because there was a lack of connection there. They liked the movies. A lot of us didn't. And the studio said, you know what, we're going to go in a different direction. And I'm not going to front. The studio did screw up Justice League. Like, it was studio interference, 100%. But also, Zack Snyder is an amazing visual artist who can do great one-to-one translations of comic book panels. That does not mean that he is great when coming with original stories or writing his own, you know, having a team write the stories for these movies. It just doesn't work. He did good with the Watchmen because there wasn't a lot of wiggle room for him to do original stuff. But when we're talking about like Superman, Man of Steel, and we're getting to the original stuff, and I'm looking at a grim and gritty Superman or Batman versus Superman, where Batman is literally running around like a serial killer, branding people and wholesale murdering people outright on my screen, that don't work. And so there was a disconnect there. But the Snyder fans are making it miserable to exist and be a fan of new DC stuff. So anyway, behind the scenes trailer come out, they mock it for lack of visual effects or grading. The algorithm incentivizes them because outrage gets clicks, so the negativity is rewarded. So if you're creating content that's negative, more people are going to see it and respond to it, whether they're responding to you positively for your negative stuff or negatively for your negative stuff. Algorithm really doesn't matter. You're going to get more, it's going to drive more traffic to it because they see it's a piece of content people are engaging with. And creators lean into it because it's easy and cheap engagement for them. The Critical Drinkers built an entire career out of absolutely not understanding movies at all and just bitching and moaning loudly about it. And he's built an entire audience of people that love his content and a larger audience of people that just hate his content, but they hate it so much that they have to watch it. Sorry, I had a blank screen there for a second. Okay. And then when you actually do legitimately enjoy something, like I enjoyed what I saw of the Fantastic Four movie before we had to run to the ER. I really enjoyed it. And posting that I enjoyed pieces of it, you always get the negative people that jump in there and try to just stomp all over the fact that you enjoyed a thing that they didn't like. It's so weird. It's weird, bro. And the outcome is you end up with joyless fandom spaces, and creators release projects and they're kind of hedging for the hate that's going to come out. It's really a weird thing. It's a really hyper negative function of nerd life, and I don't necessarily like it. I think that we need to have a space where people get to enjoy stuff without getting dogpiled because I didn't like the thing. How dare you like the thing? Be honest with you. I didn't really like Batman versus Superman. I had a whole story about watching my wife experience Batman through Superman, and that's what made the movie really, really humorous to me. Because watching somebody who is kind of on the periphery of nerdom, where she kind of knows who these characters are and stuff, and she's sitting there watching this movie legitimately confused and got to a point where she had just emotionally completely checked out and divorced herself from what was going on the screen and fell asleep. That was funny. The moment where she just kind of gave up all hope, where she turned to me in Batman versus Superman, where they actually called Lex Luthor, and she's like, wait, that's not the Riddler? That's not the Joker? Said, no, it's Lex Luthor. And then she just was done. Just said, fuck it, I'm done. And she just checked out. Like, I'm sitting next to her and I could just feel like, oh, I'm done. And then it's just staring at a screen and watching blue explosions hop up and watching Batman brand people like a serial killer. So it's making nerd stuff not fun, bro. It really does. It makes the fun part of watching and being a nerd is taking that away and stripping that out. All right. Next part. God, it feels like this entire episode is just me bitching about stuff, but I have a lot on my mind. And this one's going to be short. It's an interaction I had earlier this week. I know that there's a trend of people that just hate kids. Like that's what their personality is, right? Like online they lead with I hate kids and whatnot, and that ends up becoming their personality. I don't have a problem if you don't want to have kids. That's cool. I'm fine with it. I don't really care I have no investment in whether you have children or not, or whether you want children in your life or not. That's fine. But hating kids, when that becomes part of your personality, that shit is weird to me. It's weird as hell to me. Because one of the things I see with I hate children crowd is this. A lot of the common behaviors is these weird sexualized slurs and dehumanizing slurs where they call them crotch goblins or some other kind of weird sexualized language. Shaming parents for bringing kids in public and kids acting age appropriate. Now, I don't like parents that let their kids run all over and do whatever, and then there's no correction or no trying to redirect this child and redirect their behavior. But if I legitimately see a parent trying their best to manage a kid's behaviors, I'm not going to get mad at it. I've seen people get mad at babies for crying on airplanes. The baby doesn't know it's on an airplane. The baby's uncomfortable. The air pressure is changing. Their ears are popping. They're confused. They don't know what's going on. The parent doesn't want the baby to cry. They're trying their best to soothe the baby. They're not forcing the baby to scream and yell just to inconvenience you. Okay. And I'm sure I'm kind of shorting this because I want to get past this. To something that's a little bit more fun but still dark. Just follow my logic on it. Here's the thing. I think people need to understand that children are a class of people. They're a vulnerable class of people. And when you go into this I hate kids thing, and I've seen the extremes online, right? I've seen somebody say, well, I hate kids because I'm autistic and because that they make me upset. And it's like, so if you encounter an autistic child out in public, how are you going to treat them? Well, they just need to stay away from me. Or you need to stay away from them because you're the adult and you know better. Okay? Kids are a class of people and they deserve your respect too. Mocking them is kind of a punching down kind of thing. And yeah, we don't like unruly children. Nobody really does. But there's a balance between a parent not even trying to manage their kid's behavior and a parent who's trying their best and they're just in a constant challenge because the kid is being age appropriate. Some kids aren't manageable at specific ages. And they still have to go out. They still have to be socialized. They still have to go out in public to a degree. Now, if you're letting your kid in the restaurant just rip and run and trip people and punch people and backflip through the restaurant, then yeah, you need to take their ass home. But if a baby's crying in a restaurant because babies are want to do that, yeah, the baby probably you need to give a little bit of grace. Now, if the baby is screaming while you're watching the next Saw movie at midnight, then yeah, that's a parent thing. When my wife and I went to go see Deadpool in the theater, some guy brought his 8-year-old to see Deadpool in the movie theater. Leave your child at home. It's not for that. The flip side is when my wife and I got kidnapped to go see, we got legitimately kidnapped to go see The Passion of the Christ because neither one of us wanted to see The Passion. My mom wanted to see it. My mother-in-law wanted to see it, and so we went to support her. We did not want to see this movie. And when we're in the theater, somebody had brought their very small children. And if you've seen The Passion, this is not a place for very small children to occupy. And so we watched almost 3 hours of Jesus just absolutely getting dog walked and getting the holy hell beat out of him in the most graphic, violent way ever. And when the credits start rolling, this little tiny voice, I'll never forget, it comes back and says, "Is it over yet?" Yeah. Leave your kid at home in that sense. They don't really need to experience that. But being mad at kids for being age appropriate in public places, that's weirdo behavior. It really is to me. I mean, it's really weirdo behavior. And it shows that you have a lack of ability to govern yourself. But yeah, kids are a social class of people. And using weird sexualized slurs to insult them is weirdo behavior as far as I'm concerned. You don't have to, I'm not even saying you have to like being around children. You have the ability to dictate what you want to be around and what you don't want to be around. But what gets weird is where that ends up becoming your entire personality. And I've seen people joke about deliberately being cruel to children that they encounter out in public. Full-grown adults deliberately being cruel to children just because I don't like kids. That's not an excuse. You're a weirdo and a bully. So, age-appropriate discomfort is not bad parenting. Unruly, uncorrected behavior is a separate issue. Okay? That's just how I feel about it. All right. So, wow. All right. There's going to be some stuff that I'm going to end up leaving for next week. All right. So, I'm going to tell you this. One thing, this is my next section. One thing that I am really super fascinated with, and I've been fascinated with this since it happened, is the OceanGate submersible. That's been my ADHD fixation in my downtime, watching videos and documentaries about this entire OceanGate thing. I'm fascinated, and it's morbid. I know it's morbid, y'all. I really do. I understand that it's morbid. I'm not trying to be funny about it. But Watching how some people, watching the ineptitude, the shocking and jarring and stunning ineptitude that led up to this thing happening, there's an element of comedy to that. I'm gonna tell you why. Um, I don't wish ill on the people that died, but I'm sitting there looking at all the stuff that people in just firsthand reports and stuff like that, where people are like, yeah, man, so we get on there and bro busts out a video game controller, a Logitech video game, like not even a good one, an old Logitech game controller to control this thing. I would have looked bro dead in the face and said, there is no fucking way I'm getting on this thing. You're controlling it with a video game controller, a cheap video game controller. Are you out of your mind? And the entire process of how you have to get put into the ocean, you have to get locked into the OceanGate submersible. Like they bolt you in. And you're in there with a video game controller. And this joker's sitting there telling the reporter, yeah, I got this part at RV World. If you ever get a chance, I gotta find it. I'll post in the link if I can. I'll post in the comments if I can find it. But there's a fascinating, like 2-hour video essay about all the stuff that went wrong with this OceanGate thing, and how many red flags that they have to drive past to drop this thing into the ocean. And it was absolute insanity. And if it was just the person who was aboard that thing, it would have been kind of one of those Shakespearean tragedies or comedies. But other people lost their life, and that's sad. But if you're sitting there, if you're like, hey Brian, so we want to go see the Titanic. First of all, I'm like, why am I going to go see the Titanic? I don't. It's down there. I'm up here. That's how God intended everything to be. If he wanted me to see the Titanic, I would have been born underwater down there with $3.06. That's a deep cut. If I was intended to see the Titanic, either I would have been born during the era of the Titanic where they were building it and been on the ship and sunk to the bottom of the ocean. I would have been born underwater. But if it's down there and I'm up here, I ain't got no reason to see the damn thing. I know it's sunk. I don't really care what it looks like. It looks like a big black splotch underwater. That's what it looks like. It looks like a big splotch of things underwater. But there's some people that are driven to go into these extreme environments to go look at this thing. More power to you. If that's how you want to risk your life, go, more power to you. Just like the people that want to climb Mount Everest, even though you have to literally walk past all the dead bodies to get to the top of Mount Everest. Some people are driven to do that. Some people want to go in the ocean and look at the Titanic. Cool. That ain't me. But as soon as this joker pulls out a Logitech controller, there has to be a better way that I can go see the Titanic than this. As soon as you pull out a video controller that you bought at Radio Shack, I dated myself, that you bought at Best Buy out the clearance bin. You pull out an Xbox controller that you bought at like GameStop or something, and you say, this is what we're controlling it with. Oh, y'all ain't serious up here, right? This is like, y'all ain't serious about this, right? It's like, no, man, this is how we steer the thing. I'm good. There's got to be a better way to go see the Titanic than locking myself in here with a dude piloting this with a video game controller. But when you start watching the documentaries, they start talking about the material, all the way down to the material they use for the hull, which was carbon fiber, which people warned him about. And it didn't really deal with extreme pressure like that. There was no third-party certification. He was firing people that challenged him on this thing. They fired a whistleblower and tried to ruin his career. And there was a toxic culture, that was at OceanGate in general, because the owner was so vehemently locked in and so in love with his own brain and his own awesomeness that he's willing to risk everybody's life just to prove it. And he absolutely did. It was completely born of ego and overconfidence and systematically ignoring the people that know better. And so I'm fascinated by what compels a person to say, so you're controlling this thing in an uncontrolled, like we just get dropped into the ocean, it's an uncontrolled dive, like we just fall to the bottom of the ocean, and you're controlling this with a video game controller and stuff that you bought at RV World. Sir, I'm going to pay you a couple $1 million. Let's do this thing. It's so odd. I think sometimes you get so rich that you just look for things to give yourself shots of adrenaline. And unfortunately for the people that got on that thing, that got in that submersible, unfortunately they didn't, the way that they described it, they didn't even know what happened, which is probably for the best. Because if you're in that thing and you know what's about to happen, that would be one of the worst feelings on the planet. Um, but yeah, I'm fascinated by it. I've been consuming documentaries on it. It's almost on the obsession level of like Action Park, like Class Action Park, where I saw that documentary and I had to watch it 12 times. And I laughed every single time. I'm on that level of obsession with this because it's just amazing to me. All right. So this is the last thing I'm gonna wrap up with. Because I'm an hour into this thing. So your boy, for those that don't know, I grew up as a little gifted black kid, smarty pants, whatever, right? And part of the going along with it is you end up taking IQ tests. And so the last IQ test I took clocked me at like 145 to 150. I don't mean anything. um, you know, if that meant anything, if that, and the reason why I'm saying that is this. A lot of times, especially in the online discourse, you hear people using race, science, and IQ numbers to denigrate or insult people. I literally had somebody sit up here, look me in my face, and tell me, because we're arguing online, and he's like, "So you're telling me you're smarter than Jordan Peterson?" Well, according to what Jordan Peterson's IQ is and what mine is, yeah. I'm not saying I have more expertise on a subject than him, but by the very weird definition of how we use IQ in the society, and how yes, on paper, technically, in some circles, depending on how much you value IQ, yeah, technically, I am based on what he said his stated IQ is. Okay. So what IQ is basically a way to test your cognitive ability and test your ability to how quickly you can identify patterns in things. Okay. So it's reason, logic, and memory, not creativity or an emotional intelligence, because there's a lot of very high IQ people, um, or alleged high IQ people who completely lack any kind of emotional intelligence whatsoever. Ergo, like Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro or stuff like that. And so on paper, and so I'm not saying this as a humble brag. I'm saying this to make a point here. So I'm at like 145, 150, depending on what task I'm working on. And so 150 is a rare, but it's not 150 is a rare IQ. Like this is like 0.1% or whatnot. It's not predictive of any kind of success whatsoever. And I think we have to disconnect this idea that high IQ people are magic genies. Like Elon's kind of created this cult of personality around being high IQ, and that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Having a average IQ and being born in a family where they can give you millions and millions of dollars beats having high IQ and being born in poverty. Just what it is. Okay. Jordan Peterson claims a 150 IQ, so we're probably standing foot, equal or whatnot. But like Jimmy Carter's like 150, Kennedy's like 150. And so I'm saying that to say this: there's a lot of weird race science that goes along with IQ, and so I'm kind of using myself as an example. But the idea is somebody told me I'm not as smart as Peterson. If you believe their numbers, then they're in my range. But this is why IQ is not a legitimate hierarchy. It doesn't really dictate anything. So many things can sway a result on an IQ test. And even such, there could be environmental factors. There can be some reading comprehension, because having an IQ doesn't mean that your reading comprehension scores are amazing. It just means you could recognize patterns really well. And a lot of race science bullshit misuses IQ. It misuses IQ to promote racial hierarchies. They ignore environmental, cultural, and historical factors, plus any kind of test bias. And that's why they work so hard in some cases to try to reiterate and revise those tests, actually strip out those biases so that they can get a more accurate estimation of it. I'm not in Mensa or anything like that, because I don't believe in that. It's like, I don't believe it. We got to hang out with all these smart people, and we all got to be smart in the same room and talk about how smart we are. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I could probably qualify for it. I don't want to. It just kind of seems weird to me. But I'm talking about the race science of it, and it just feels like there's a level of scientifically and emotionally and morally bankrupt when we use arbitrary things like intelligence quotient to subjugate and label people as high IQ or low IQ. And you see it a lot in the Twitter discourse. And it's always the dumbest motherfucker on Twitter doing that. Like literally, if you go through their tweets, you're going to find some very, very dumb tweets. But they're also the first ones talking about high IQ and what high IQ people do. And then they're talking about median IQ and stuff like that. It kind of goes back to the fact that, we're starting to see this where pop culture is kind of really leaned into taking on therapeutic language. And so now everybody's a narcissist, or, people have OCD, or, I have OCD about that. We're using a lot of clinical terms in our regular patterns of speech. And what that does a lot of times is it devalues the actual clinical definitions of things. And so I think IQ is kind of a low hanging fruit for a lot of people that don't necessarily understand how IQ works or what it actually measures. So, like I said, I'm throwing that out there. 150 IQ, I'm waiting on my first $1 billion, and it ain't coming. All right. So I've kind of nagged at you. I think I'll go ahead and finish this last thing. And so I'm gonna go into this. Last week we talked about hip hop journalism and what that was my goal, to be a hip hop journalist. And so I kind of want to follow up and kind of put an addendum on this conversation. Okay. I talked about my dream of writing for The Source, and I guess I would have written for XXL had I had the opportunity. But the entire Benzino thing and what he did with The Source really soured me on the concept of it, because I felt like it was really kind of bankrupt. And I'm using bankrupt a lot. Apparently, that's my ADHD word of the day. No, but it was really kind of disenchanted me from it. And so looking at hip hop journalism now, I think it might actually be cooked. And I'm not saying it's cooked in general. Like, there's still people out there that are still trying their best. Like I mentioned, a company man talk about Fantano. I've seen Lil Bill do some stuff. I've seen FD do some stuff. I've seen people actually offer commentary on it. There's one that I was messing with, but I'm not going to mention his name because I'm starting to see a trend on his stuff. But what I'm seeing is I think that lane might be cooked. Okay. And even then there was an element of this. So let's not throw the baby out completely with the bathwater, but let's talk about then versus now in that construct. So then I think it was, what was it? Sewin Hines. I think that's what his name was. I got to look his name up. Seafood, because they call him Seafood Hines, The Source. Magazine. It was one of my favorite writers, and he in The Source, because I used to read Star and Buck Wild and stuff, and I was really intrigued by the comedy writing, right? Before Star became, the known troll and stuff like that. Yep. Selwyn Seyfu Hines. He was my favorite writer because he talked politics. It was really tried to drill down into the actual culture and talk about some of the elements of the music and things like that. And his reviews of the music actually came from a place of love and compassion for the music. And so I probably need to follow him because it looks like he's writing comic books and stuff. Wow, cool. So anyway, I was a huge fan, and that was the person I followed. That was the writer I would always follow in The Source. I always make sure I read his stuff. Always, whether it was his editorials, his reviews, whatever, his interviews, I would always read those. And that was who I really modeled myself after. And it was thought to it. It was actually going into and talking about elements of the culture and bringing historical elements, talking about things that have preceded this artist and what their influences were. Okay. And there were some deep dives and, challenging artists on how they put things and challenging them on the content of their songs. There's actually some cultural critiques and stuff. Now, what we see is It's basically the news, the hip hop journalism is basically PR for these artists. And the artists treat them like PR. And so anytime artist gets challenged, um, specifically with the new crop of artists, it turns confrontational fast. And I'm not saying it didn't do that back then, because we talk about Dr. Dre and D Barnes. Okay. Um, but the problems with the PR only coverage, or the PR motivated hip hop coverage, is um, people are scared to lose access to these artists. And the journalism is reduced to press releases with better formatting, where all they're doing is hyping up somebody's newest album and not necessarily critically evaluating or talking about it. I've seen it on Joe Budden where they try to do some critical analysis of it, but even then, there's still an element of pandering. And it creates this echo chamber effect where artists aren't necessarily challenged by the critics or whatnot, or they create this adversarial relationship with the critics, and they do the opposite of what the critics say, which is fine too. But there's nobody really sitting there and looking and deconstructing these albums and stuff like that and writing seriously about the art form. And I think we're not only just seeing it in hip hop, I think it's happening in rock too. But what happens is the culture loses depth and history is erased. When nobody's there to talk about who somebody's influences are, what something is derivative of, everybody thinks that these are brand new things that they're coming up with and brand new ideas. Newer movements end up getting ignored. And so, like, one of the things in the source got challenged for their East Coast bias. I know, I think Rap City got challenged for some of its East Coast bias, just based on the fact it was a DC based show. And they are forced to acknowledge West Coast artists. They're forced to acknowledge artists from all over the country. The Source magazine was forced to acknowledge artists from down south and talk about that wave that was coming from down south. The Master P and Master P with No Limit and Cash Money. But even then, before then, Mystical, who's already doing stuff down south and things like that. The Ghetto Boys, who were always down south, but they were Texas based, not Louisiana based. The other movements got ignored. There are other movements and other movements within the music and other subgenres that end up getting ignored because everybody wants to talk about what's popular as opposed to what's up and coming. Okay. And new fans only get to see curated, brand safe hip hop. And even, I don't want to say brand safe because it's not necessarily stuff you can put on television all the time, but it's curated for them. Their tastes are curated. And so you can even see it with how younger fans who are newer to the culture consume the music, because anything that sounds different than what they're used to, instead of curiosity, it's revulsion. What is this? I don't like this, without saying, hey, this sounds different. Let me check it out. I was driven hugely. I listened to a lot of artists that I ended up not liking just because I was curious about it. I would deliberately go out and track down artists that were lowly ranked in the source to kind of see what I thought about them. Okay. So why this matters to me, I wanted to document hip hop, not just market what's coming out. And now real coverage requires building my independent lane. And so we'll see what happens with that in the future. I'm probably going to have more hip hop themed shows for this platform. So anyway, I'm wrapping it up. I do appreciate y'all tuning in and listening to me rant on a bunch of really depressing shit. Hopefully next week I can come back with some more fun stuff where I can actually talk more about some comic book stuff. But there hasn't been a lot that's been going on in the books. Maybe I could talk about what's going on in the Ultimates and stuff like that. In the Ultimate Universe. I'll come back next week. Hopefully we'll have some releases from the Absolute line in DC, because those books are really interesting. I know we have Absolute Superman, but I don't necessarily want to talk about that one. It was Absolute Flash and Absolute Superman dropped, I think, this week and last week. And so I'm kind of making notes about what I want to talk about, but I'm waiting for Absolute Batman to drop because that's the one I'm excited about. So that's what I got, y'all. I really do appreciate y'all's time. Thanks for tuning in and listening to me rant. I will talk to y'all later. See y'all next Tuesday. Be looking for the clips. I'm going to start posting these videos on YouTube. And if you like what I'm doing, leave me a like or something just to kind of let me know that you're watching on these platforms, because I'm really trying to determine what platform I want to be on. I'm trying to determine if I'm going to take this live stream on Tuesday nights and move it over to TikTok. And see if I can get some more engagement there, because I really do need y'all jumping in and asking questions and stuff. So I do appreciate y'all. Thanks for tuning in. I'll holler at y'all later. Blerding While Dad is out.